I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer for Gold Derby, and I'm joined today by two crew members of Netflix's Dahmer Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, both of whom are Emmy nominated this year. I'm here with Shay Sanford-Fong, the department head of hair, and Gigi Williams, the department head of makeup. And first of
Hi.
all, congratulations on your
Yeah.
nominations this year. And you know what?
Thanks.
Let's start right there. How did each of you find out? Gigi, let's start with you because this is actually your career first bid.
Yes, it is. It was COVID. I was not going to work for maybe a year.
Mhm.
I didn't want to be in COVID esque places, and I got a phone call from Ryan Murphy's people, and I was like, "Really? Why me? Because I'm not really in their circle."
Mhm.
And they said, "Well, we're doing uh, a movie about Jeffrey Dahmer, serial killer." And I said, "Oh,
Mhm.
so I like serial killers because I've done quite a few. It's my forte, basically." And so I took the meeting, and they said they didn't want any makeup. They wanted a lot of sweat. It was supposed to be gritty. It was supposed to be real. All of the things that thrill me. And then I also asked how they found me, and they said it was somebody that I've worked with at Netflix before.
Mhm.
So my first question was, what do we do about hair? And we just, nothing came up. And then I got called to do one day on the Halston
Mhm.
series. It was going to be the end, and Shay showed up to do hair. And I turned to the producers, and I was like, I have to have her because we were just simpatico from the minute we said hello. We were
Mhm.
collaborative. We saw everything the same way, and they said, "Well, you can't have her. Shay, you go."
Well, she couldn't have me because I was in American Crime Story impeachment at the
Right.
time.
Mhm.
But I wasn't department heading. I was just the third because it was the first job I had during COVID, which was great because I do have kids at home. So I'm like the third, get to leave, not that many responsibilities. So I stayed.
Mhm.
Then I went to do Halston with Gigi, and they asked me again, do you do Dahmer? And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm pretty comfortable where I'm at. And then I got an email stating that Gigi and the producers really want me to go over there.
Mhm.
And I knew I had to do the show. I was so intrigued with the show to begin with,
Mhm.
but I was comfortable spot in my life with being off for so many months
Mhm.
that it kind of scared me, but I took the chance and I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Now, the two of you are here and are both Emmy nominated. What does it mean to you to be nominated for this project? Like I said, Gigi, this is your first nomination, but Shay, this is actually your third because you've won twice for the other Ryan Murphy production you already mentioned, which is American Crime Story. So, what does this recognition mean to each of you?
It means a lot to me because I worked so hard on this project. I don't really do TV very much.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in this business, the makeup you do doesn't scream, if it isn't the first thing you see, if it isn't over the top,
Yeah.
people don't really give a shit. That one. And
Yeah.
so I felt like when I filled out the information to send off to submission, I
Hmm.
had said, what we were asked to do was to create a mood, to create claustrophobia, to create
Yeah. Yeah.
heat and
Hmm.
sweat and grit and basically fear. It's the feeling of fear. And so
Absolutely.
I wrote that in my submission, and they took it out. They said they're not interested in that. They're only interested in what you did.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, but that is what I did. So
Hmm.
for me, this really means a lot because I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for years now that makeup should be subtle. It's not the character, it's a piece of the character. So for
Absolutely.
me, it was very gratifying that I was, that my work was felt
Hmm.
basically. So it means a lot to me.
Yeah. And Shay, for you.
for me, I mean, I'm so grateful for the other two that I had won. But I was the additional hairstylist, part of a team, which was great. And I learned so much I learned from everybody. And this time I was the department head and for the looks. So this one meant a lot to me because in my life, I just really wanted that nomination or that recognition of my creativity and what I can give to everybody. So I was really nervous. I didn't think it was going to happen.
Wow.
I was really, really shocked. And everyone's like, no, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'm like, you know what? It's not going to happen. It's okay. You know, I gave it my all. So I didn't even listen to the nominations. I figured if my phone was going to start buzzing, that I knew it was good things. If it wasn't going to buzz, nothing was happening. So I even had someone send it to me. I'm like, I have to see it or like on a piece of paper. So there's 70 pictures, like, there is your name. It happened. So I was overwhelmed and I got a little teary eyed. I was very, very happy. Very, very happy. Happy for me and happy for my team.
Yeah. I can imagine, you know, and I do want to get into each of the episodes that the two of you are nominated for. But before we start there, I actually want to ask a few general questions and kind of start with the obvious, which is transforming Evan Peters into Jeffrey Dahmer, because I don't think a lot of people realize just how much work goes into that went into that transformation. And I actually want to start with you, Shay, because I know that summer blonde is very tricky to pull off, especially in a show like this, which kind of bathes in this, you know, yellowish color palette. So talk about how you perfected that hair color and, you know, how it kind of changes throughout the show.
Well, that has been the biggest question because, as Gigi knows, the filters that they used was in a urine yellow. So when we first met Evan, he had dark hair, kind of like the color you have, Luca. He was doing American Horror Story. So he had super dark hair, super short hair. And Ryan came in. We knew that we had a couple wigs that we were going to use throughout the decades. But for like the 90s and the 70s, Ryan wanted to use extensions for the 70s and then his natural hair for the 90s. So I had a colorist that worked for me. She was part of my team. And I'm like, we need to do summer blonde. So the first time we saw Evan, we only had one pass with him to do highlights. And it was kind of still too ash. So then Ryan's like, this is not the color. And I'm like, okay, I'll have the colors here in 10 minutes. She came to the trailer. I'm like, we're blonde. Because the problem was when we brought Evan to camera, it almost looked like a maroon color. It kept picking up so many different tones of red. It was not reading a nice summer blonde. So Ryan sat in the trailer while we highlighted Evan's hair again. And then we put him back on camera. And then we got the perfect color. But then, you know, through the years, you know, from the 70s, he had that fresh, mullety, you know, wavy hair that was just very soft looking. And then we went through the decades, through the 80s, we started getting him a little more grimy and greasy because we figured with Evan and I talking, he wanted his hair to look a little more disheveled. So late 80s, you know, he had to be handsome when he went to these clubs. He had to be persuasive, gentleman. So we made him very handsome, but then through the killings, he got dirtier. Because if you think, he really did not bathe because he stored a lot of bodies in his bathtub.
Right. Yeah.
So if you think if nobody has a shower, they're going to get a little grimy and gross.
It's true.
So it was definitely a story through the years of his hair.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And I actually we'll get back to the sort of greasy part when we talk about the first episode specifically. But before that, I want to throw the same question to you, Gigi, because what role did makeup then play in that same transformation? And how does it change throughout the show to sort of reflect his worsening mental condition as we go through the years?
Well, the first time I saw him, the look that I wanted to get the most right, of course, was 1991.
Yeah.
At the end, which the real Dahmer has a very thick 5 o'clock shadow. He's got dark circles. Well, Evan doesn't look like that at all.
Mhm.
Evan hardly has any facial hair. He looks like a little baby.
Mhm.
He's got his eyes are very far apart. Dahmer's aren't. The eyebrows are all wrong. So I was like, okay, what do I do here? So I
Mhm.
sat him down and started flicking 5 o'clock shadow on, and then dark circles, and then, changing the shape of his eyebrows. Somebody asked me one day, does he have any makeup on at all? And I was like, you wouldn't believe it, but there's 54 steps that
Yeah.
go into making this makeup that
Mhm.
doesn't look like he has any on. So
Mhm.
that's what we did. And then as we locked that one in, that look in, then we could go backwards, because we go back to his senior year in high school.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of mustaches and sideburns, and on any given day he could be fresh and sunny, and he would say, don't forget the sun glow, for when he was younger. And then as it got worse, red rimmed eyes, and it got very convoluted. And then on each day I would say to him, how drunk are you today? How do you feel today? What are so that I could help his emotions.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we also did some black eyes and a lot of nasty hands, etc. So anyway, I was very pleased. I didn't get any notes from Ryan, which meant he was
Nice.
pleased.
Yeah, that's great. And what you mentioned earlier, that you got comments or had people asking you whether there was any makeup on him, I think is the biggest compliment you can get, because it shows that it's just part of the character. It's not ostentatious. It's not, and I think that's especially the case in the episode you're nominated for, which is Bad Meat, the first episode of the show, which is ironically also the climax of the story. And each of you have sort of touched on it already. But Gigi, I'll start with you. Talk a bit about creating that specific look on Evan at that specific time in 1991, because I believe it's the one that I think most people will probably remember.
Exactly. Well, it was a lot of distress,
Mhm.
and a lot of changing the shape of his face. We had
Mhm.
plumpers in, because the real Dahmer looks like he's been what's the word, curb stomped.
Yeah.
His chin kind of goes in like this, and he's got called this. So we had plumpers that changed the shape of here, and I shaded under here. It's all, it was just at the moment how we were feeling. We would look at it, he would be in my chair listening to his tapes, and I would just be adding or subtracting sweat, etc.,
Mhm.
to make him feel distressed. And I must say that when we first did this look, he looked in the mirror when I was finished, and he went, and I could tell that he now felt
Was Dahmer.
like Dahmer. When we did the makeup test, the DP, who I didn't really know very well, he came running over going, oh my God.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a testament to your work. And then Shay, for at this point, his hair is greasier than ever before, or at least that's what it looked like. So, walk me through what was important for you when it came to this specific look, and then how did you pull off to sort of create that peak greasiness, for the lack of a better word.
Well, if you notice between the first episode and throughout the episodes, how we keep flashing back to when he got arrested.
Yeah.
At the beginning, Evan's hair was a lot shorter because he was helping. So we just finally got the blonde right, but his bangs were shorter. So we just kind of played with different products to see what looked greasy, but just still kept a shape.
Right.
To his, and we found two products that worked great to give him the dimensions of the dark roots with the blonde. It's just that what you would get natural highlights during the summer. So it was literally just trying to keep it continuity as possible
Mhm.
with him fighting, and then his
Right.
things get a little longer. So it was a challenge, but nobody ever said anything of episode 1, his bangs were shorter, and episode 8, he was fine.
Yeah.
So it worked.
It absolutely did. And that's honestly one of the special things about this show is that, it not only spans multiple decades, but it also follows this nonlinear story structure, which I have to imagine, or as you've already talked about, must have been a tremendous challenge for the two of you. So I'd be curious to hear how you not only ensured that you had an understanding of each of the styles of each period that's depicted on the show, but then also ensured that you could kind of go in and out of periods and timelines seamlessly, so that you could, for example, create the look of a very specific time in 1991. Whoever would like to take that one first.
Shay made the most amazing boards.
Yeah.
She's the one who kept the timeline. She had every single scene, what year, basically what minute. And so she was the keeper of the Bible. Shay?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a little OCD, I'm not gonna lie. But it's
I get that.
I have to see a visual thing to understand my own timeline. So I kept breaking it down. And like I said in the beginning, as far as the greasier side, or he had, we know that we don't shoot in order. So we are going from 1978 to 1994 to 1982. So Evan had 2 wigs, and then he had his extension piece for 78, and then his greasy look for the 90s. So I had to torment poor Evan. Gelling his hair down one day and doing wigs, and then blowing out his hair to go to the 80s, and then greasing him up. So Gigi and I just had a system, and it just worked. They would never wait for us. It just, once you do repetitive things, you just know how it works, what's going to work, and not irritate the actor, that I constantly have to keep yanking at your hair. But Evan was great for that. He knew what our job was and what to create those decades. So yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He also relied on Shay's Bible, because he would say, "Where are we?" And we would bring out the Bible, and he would say, "Okay." So it was actually all 3 of us followed the Bible that OCD Shay made. I didn't have to, because she did it. So it worked out great for all of us.
Yeah, because what Evan is feeling for Dahmer might be different than what Gigi and I read.
Absolutely.
So sometimes we have to all get together and say, okay, we all have to be on the same page to sell it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense if we each want something different. So you definitely constantly have to work with them and make sure that we all understand where he is in his timeline, or how he is emotionally feeling at the time, because Evan he just relied on us, because he was so focused on his dialogue or the emotion of the scene that Gigi and I would just attack. This is what it is. And it worked. He just let us do our thing, it's great when we're able to do what we're meant to do.
Yeah.
Plus, in that first episode, he starts basically at the bar. So he's looking dapper and good in 1991. And then he slowly devolves until he's, on the floor, writhing, saying, "I did it, and I should go to hell for it." So in those 2 weeks that episode took place, we did have a lot of continuity and a lot of back and forth, depending on what our location was. And it was an interesting psychological test for all of us.
Yeah, I can imagine, but I just wanted to mention that, Evan has also spoken so often about how it really was your 2 departments that helped him keep track of all these different timelines, because he's the one who has to go in and out of them emotionally, and has to, within an episode, depict, 5 to 6 timelines. So I think the work paid off. And you know, sorry to make this jump, but I do briefly want to talk about the episode that you're nominated for, Shay, which is Lionel, which of course features the victim impact statements, and it's just one of the most important episodes of the show. And the actors playing the family members, they resemble their real life counterparts quite a bit, sometimes almost to an eerie degree. So why was it important to you? Each of both of you can say something to this, but why was it important to everyone that they actually resembled their real life counterparts so much, and how much work went into creating those looks given that desire for resemblance then?
Well, for that episode, I mean, there were so many characters, and sometimes it would be a last minute casting. So you're literally on your toes all the time of like, okay, this person does not have the hair that I need. So my team was so great with getting everything together that, as far as like, we need these wigs, or this is what I want. Like, I wanted to resemble the characters to the real people because I wanted to make it feel like you were actually in that courtroom, to really feel the experience that they were going through at that time. With like Rita Isabel yelling, the one that screamed, I had to have her hair look exactly like that, like the real person, because they had her in the same clothes. So she had to have the same hair. So we did our best to resemble all those characters. And I was really, really pleased with everything, how it turned out. But it was a very emotional thing, even like us watching the monitors and listening to these people lash out. You really don't understand that feeling until you're there.
Absolutely.
So it was definitely an emotional episode, feeling how these families felt, which is totally understandable. But I was very pleased with everything and how they edited it, and it looked so good.
Yeah. Gigi, is there
and
anything
at
you
2
would like to
o'clock,
add?
2 o'clock, yes, 2 o'clock in the morning, because we shot that scene all night. It was a full night shoot.
Really?
My favorite part of my job, the thing I like to do the most, is to recreate true life characters. I'm very it comes very easy to me. That's my favorite thing to do. So having these different characters with as little as possible, making them look as close as possible, so that you're not, you're not in makeup for like 900 years, but you're giving, I like to say, it's kind of making the silhouette, even though it's not a silhouette, you're putting together a character as best you can from a photograph.
Yeah. Yep. And the work really pays off, because it is really such an emotional episode. And
yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you don't copy them, it doesn't work.
That's
you're trying to give them real life drama, so
Absolutely.
you have to buy it that is the person.
Yeah, you don't want to confuse people of who is that supposed to be. People knew right away who that person was and why they were there.
Absolutely. And I think I could talk to the two of you for hours, but I think that's a perfect note to end on, because we're unfortunately out of time. But thank you so much for walking me through your process. It was absolutely fascinating to listen to. And congratulations again on your nominations.
Thank you.
Thanks. And it was great working with you, Luca. Good questions.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thank you, of course.